Welcome, rare gems. Your comeback begins the moment you stop trying to return to the person you were. Have you ever looked at your life and realized that the woman you are becoming would never tolerate some of the things you once accepted? That realization can be uncomfortable, but it can also be the beginning of something powerful. For the Sigma female, a real comeback is not about revenge, proving people wrong, or creating a perfect image. It is about changing the decisions that quietly shape her life. She begins to understand her patterns, becomes more careful about who receives her time, and learns to recognize the difference between genuine care and temporary attention. Maybe you have been misunderstood. Maybe you have given too many chances, stayed too long, or carried situations that were never yours to fix. Those experiences do not have to become your identity. They can become wisdom. This is one reason the Sigma personality feels different. You are willing to question yourself, learn from uncomfortable experiences, and rebuild your life according to what you have discovered rather than what people expect from you. And the most interesting part is that your transformation may not look dramatic at first. It may simply be better decisions, healthier relationships, clearer thinking, stronger boundaries, and greater peace. Stay with me until the end, because these insights will help you understand the deeper meaning behind your comeback and why your transformation may surprise people who thought they already knew you. Watch until the end, then share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which point speaks to you most, and subscribe to join our community. Now let's get started. The rare gems. Number 1, God may restore you without restoring your old life. Sometimes restoration does not mean getting the same relationship, friendship, opportunity, lifestyle, or version of yourself back. God may restore your direction instead of your circumstances. What if the thing you are praying for God to restore is not what He intends to return to you? This can be one of the hardest lessons to accept, because we often define restoration as getting back what we lost. We want the same relationship, the same friendship, the same opportunity, the same lifestyle, or even the same version of ourselves. But sometimes God answers a prayer for restoration by changing the direction of your life rather than returning you to its previous condition. Think about a woman who spends months praying for a relationship to come back. She remembers the good moments and believes that getting that person back would finally make everything feel complete. But with time, she begins to understand why the relationship ended. She becomes wiser, more emotionally mature, and more aware of what she had been tolerating. Then she realizes something uncomfortable. Maybe God was not trying to restore the relationship. Maybe He was restoring her ability to recognize what love should actually feel like. That distinction can completely change how you understand loss. Sometimes you are asking God to reopen a door because you remember what was behind it, while God may be showing you that the door belonged to a season you have already outgrown. And this does not mean every painful experience was secretly good. Loss can genuinely hurt. Disappointment can leave questions that do not disappear overnight. Faith does not require pretending that everything was easy, but restoration can happen in unexpected forms. Your confidence can return. Your direction can become clearer. Your peace can become stronger. Your judgment can become wiser. Your relationship with God can deepen. You may even discover that what you once considered a devastating loss prevented you from building your future around something that could not carry you there. So do not measure God's restoration only by what comes back. Sometimes restoration is the courage to stop reaching backward. Sometimes it is the wisdom to recognize that the old life cannot contain the person you have become. And sometimes the blessing is not getting your old life back. It is finally becoming ready for the life you were not able to see before. Number 2, Your comeback will expose who loved you and who loved your struggle. This can be painful. Some people feel comfortable around you when you are struggling because your dependence gives them a role. What if some people were not deeply connected to you, but deeply connected to the version of you that needed them? That is one of the uncomfortable truths a comeback can reveal. When you are struggling, certain people may naturally become important in your life. They give advice, solve problems, offer support, or make decisions for you. Sometimes that support is genuine and beautiful, but sometimes a hidden imbalance develops. Your difficulty gives someone a sense of importance, control, or superiority. Then you begin to change. You become financially stronger, you make your own decisions, you become emotionally steadier, you stop needing someone to rescue you from every difficult situation. You become capable of standing on your own feet. And suddenly the relationship feels different. A person who once seemed incredibly supportive may become strangely distant, critical, or uncomfortable with your progress. They may make little comments that sound harmless, but carry resentment. You have really changed. You think you can do everything yourself now. You do not need anyone anymore. Maybe you have changed, but perhaps you have simply stopped needing the relationship in the same way. For example, imagine a friend who was always there when you were financially struggling. You appreciated their help deeply. Later, your situation improves, and you no longer need to borrow money or depend on them for basic decisions. A healthy friend can celebrate that freedom. An unhealthy dynamic may become uncomfortable because the old power balance has disappeared. This does not mean you should automatically distrust anyone who struggles with your growth. People can have complicated emotions without being secretly against you. The real test is what they do with those emotions. Can they celebrate your progress without competing with you? Can they respect your independence without becoming distant? Can they support the stronger version of you just as they supported the struggling version? Your comeback does not necessarily create the truth about a relationship. It reveals what was already there. And sometimes that revelation hurts, but it can also be a gift, because you finally know who is happy that you are healing and who was only comfortable while you were hurting. Number 3. You will discover that some doors were not closed against you. Have you ever looked back at something you desperately wanted and quietly wondered, why did God let that slip away? At the time, a closed door can feel deeply personal. You applied and were rejected. You loved someone, and the relationship ended. You expected an opportunity to work out, but it disappeared. You may have prayed, waited, hoped, and still watched the situation fall apart. But distance can reveal what emotion could not. Sometimes the door was not closed because you were unworthy. It was closed because what was behind it could not take you where you were meant to go. Consider a relationship you once believed was your future. While you were inside it, you focused on the affection, memories, and potential. After leaving, you may slowly notice how much of yourself you had been suppressing just to keep everything working. What looked like losing someone may have actually been losing a version of yourself that was becoming smaller. The same can happen with opportunities. You might desperately want a particular job, business partnership, friendship, or lifestyle. Then it falls through, and you feel like you have been overlooked. Months later, you discover another opportunity that gives you greater freedom, better relationships, or room to develop abilities you would never have used before. That does not mean every disappointment was secretly a divine message. Life is complicated, and sometimes doors close because of ordinary circumstances, poor timing, other people's decisions, or mistakes. But faith allows you to believe that a closed door does not have to become the end of your story. Sometimes rejection forces you to reconsider your direction. Sometimes losing access to a place reveals how badly you had outgrown it. Sometimes God allows you to grieve something because you are still attached to what it represented, even though it no longer fits who you are becoming. So before you call every closed door a tragedy, give yourself enough distance to understand what was behind it. You may eventually realize that you were not being pushed backward. You were being redirected toward a life you could not recognize from where you were standing. Number 4. The most shocking part of her comeback is that she doesn't need to look like she's winning. What if the most powerful comeback is the one nobody notices while it is happening? That is the part many people misunderstand about the Sigma female. She does not need to make her transformation obvious. There may be no dramatic announcement, no carefully chosen social media post, and no confrontation designed to make someone regret hurting her. Her life simply begins moving in a different direction. From the outside, it might even look boring. She starts managing her money better. She becomes serious about her work. She takes better care of her body. She reads more. She becomes careful about the people she allows close to her. She learns skills that increase her independence. She sleeps peacefully because she is no longer spending every night analyzing someone else's behavior. None of this makes for a dramatic movie scene, but it changes her entire future. For example, imagine a woman who once spent every spare moment checking what an old partner was doing. Instead of trying to make that person notice her progress, she puts that energy into building a career, paying off debt, learning something valuable, or creating a healthier routine. 6 months later, nobody may have noticed the process, but she notices. Her bank account looks different. Her thinking is different. Her friendships are different. Her standards are different. Most importantly, her decisions are no longer controlled by the emotional wounds that once dominated her attention. That is a serious comeback. She does not need to look successful every day because she is no longer performing success for an audience. She is building something that has value even when nobody is watching. And eventually, people from her past may encounter her again. They may expect the same woman they remember. Instead, they find someone who has quietly developed a completely different life. That is when the shock arrives. Not because she tried to shock them, but because she spent so much time improving her life that she eventually moved far beyond the place where they left her. Her greatest victory is not making people watch her win. It is building a life she no longer needs them to witness. Number 5. The woman they betrayed will not be the woman they meet again. What happens when the woman someone betrayed learns from the experience instead of allowing it to define her? People often remember us according to the version of us they had access to. They may remember the woman who kept forgiving, gave one more chance, explained herself repeatedly, stayed when leaving would have been easier, and believed that patience could eventually make someone change. But they may not realize that every experience was teaching her something. Betrayal can teach her to pay attention to patterns instead of promises. Disappointment can teach her that someone's potential is not the same thing as their character. Being taken for granted can teach her that love without respect eventually becomes exhausting. So, when she changes, the difference may be difficult for certain people to understand. Imagine someone who once lied to her and received another opportunity because she believed their apology. Later, they repeat the behavior. This time, she does not spend weeks trying to convince herself that things will be different. She looks at what happened, accepts the evidence, and makes a different decision. That is growth. She has not necessarily become colder, she has become more informed. This is an important distinction because pain can produce two very different outcomes. It can make someone bitter and suspicious of everyone, or it can make someone wiser about whom they trust and how quickly they give access to their life. The healthier path is not becoming incapable of trusting. It is learning to trust gradually and intelligently. That is why the woman they betrayed may surprise them later. They may remember her softness, but not realize that she now has discernment behind it. They may remember her patience, but not realize that her patience now has boundaries. They may remember how easily she stayed, but fail to understand that she now knows when staying is costing too much, and if they meet her again, they may look for the old emotional doorway. It may no longer exist. She does not need revenge to prove that she changed. Her decisions will tell the story for her. The woman they betrayed survived the experience. The woman they meet again has learned from it. Number 6. Her standards become more precise, not simply higher. What does it really mean when a Sigma female says her standards have changed? It is easy to say, I have high standards. Anyone can say that. But high standards without self-awareness can simply become a long list of demands. Her deeper transformation happens when she becomes precise about what she actually needs, what she will no longer tolerate, and most importantly, why. She stops being impressed by charm alone because she has learned that a person can be incredibly charming and still be unreliable. She stops treating apologies as proof of change because she has discovered that words are cheap when the same behavior keeps returning. This is where her standards become evidence-based. For example, someone might repeatedly disappoint her, apologize sincerely, promise to improve, and then repeat the exact behavior 2 weeks later. Earlier in her life, the emotional apology might have been enough to bring everything back to normal. Now she watches what happens after the apology. Does the behavior change? Does the person take responsibility without making excuses? Do their actions remain consistent when nobody is watching? Those questions tell her far more than a beautiful speech ever could. She also becomes more careful about confusing intelligence with character. Someone can be highly educated, witty, ambitious, and incredibly successful while still being dishonest, selfish, or emotionally irresponsible. She learns that competence in one area does not automatically mean goodness in another. The same applies to affection. Attention is not automatically care. Chemistry is not automatically compatibility. Someone can make her feel deeply wanted while having absolutely no ability to build a stable relationship. Her standards therefore become less about finding a flawless person and more about recognizing patterns. She looks at consistency, accountability, emotional maturity, respect, honesty, and how someone behaves when things do not go their way. That is a much more intelligent form of discernment. She is no longer asking, how impressive is this person? She is asking, what does their behavior consistently reveal about their character? That question can save her from years of unnecessary disappointment. Her comeback is not that she expects perfection. Her comeback is that she finally trusts evidence more than potential. Number 7. She doesn't rebuild the woman they lost. She becomes someone they never had access to. There is something deeply unsettling about watching a woman you thought you understood become someone you can no longer predict. This is where the Sigma female's comeback becomes different. She is not trying to rebuild the woman people remember. She is rebuilding herself from a much deeper place. For years, she may have been known as the woman who tolerated certain behavior, gave too many chances, explained herself repeatedly, or stayed longer than she should have. People became comfortable with that version of her. They learned what she would forgive. They learned how much disrespect she would overlook. They learned how easily guilt could make her reconsider a decision. But eventually, she starts asking a painful question. Was that really who I was? Or was that who I became because of what I kept tolerating? That question can change everything. Her transformation may not be dramatic at first. She simply stops returning to conversations that always end the same way. She stops rescuing relationships that only survive because she carries them. She stops explaining boundaries to people who clearly understand them but dislike them. For example, suppose someone repeatedly cancels plans, disappears when they need emotional support, and returns whenever they want something. The old version of her might spend hours trying to understand their behavior. The new version doesn't need a dramatic confrontation. She simply changes their level of access to her life. And that is what shocks people. They may still recognize her face, her voice, her humor, and her kindness, but they no longer have the same doorway into her emotions. The woman they remember was accessible because she had not yet learned what access should cost. Her comeback is not becoming cruel. It is becoming conscious. She finally understands that boundaries are not walls built to punish people. They are doors that she now has the wisdom to decide when to open. That is why her transformation can leave people stunned. She did not become someone better for them. She became someone more honest for herself. Number 8. Her greatest transformation happens in places nobody can see. What if the biggest evidence that a Sigma female is changing is the fact that nobody can see it? This is the part of her comeback that people often misunderstand. They expect transformation to look dramatic. They expect a new appearance, a new relationship, a bigger lifestyle, or some public announcement that she has moved on. But real transformation can be almost invisible. She may simply start sleeping peacefully again. She wakes up without immediately thinking about what someone said to her yesterday. She stops replaying old conversations in her head, searching for the perfect response she should have given 3 months ago. She stops checking someone's social media, wondering who they are with, or whether they have finally noticed her absence. That may look ordinary, but psychologically, it is enormous. Think about someone who used to spend hours wondering why a person changed toward her. She might analyze every message, every silence, every small detail. Then one day she notices she has not thought about that person all week. Nothing happened externally. Something happened internally. Her mind simply stopped treating the situation as unfinished business. That is where her comeback becomes powerful. She is no longer spending her present trying to rewrite her past. Her attention slowly returns to her own life. She starts making decisions based on what she genuinely wants instead of what will make someone else understand her. And this transformation can be uncomfortable because growth is not always exciting. Sometimes it looks like going home early, protecting your peace, reading, working, exercising, saving money, learning something new, or simply enjoying a quiet evening without needing anyone to know about it. While other people are waiting for a dramatic comeback, she is rebuilding her inner world. Her confidence becomes less dependent on circumstances. Her judgment becomes sharper. Her emotions become easier to understand. Her boundaries become natural rather than forced. Nobody may notice the process. Then one day, they meet her again and realize something has changed. She did not disappear. She evolved. Number 9, her comeback makes her less impressive to certain people. And that is the point. One of the strangest things about personal growth is discovering that becoming healthier can actually make you less impressive to certain people. The Sigma female eventually learns that not everyone who enjoyed her company was enjoying her for the right reasons. Some people liked how available she was. Some liked how easily she forgave. Others enjoyed having someone who would listen to every problem, make excuses for bad behavior, and remain around even after being treated poorly. Then she starts changing. She becomes more careful with her time. She stops laughing at things that secretly hurt her. She stops answering every message immediately. She becomes less interested in pointless arguments and less willing to participate in emotional drama. And suddenly, someone says, "You have become arrogant." That accusation can be confusing until she asks a better question. What exactly changed? Maybe she did not become arrogant. Maybe she simply stopped being excessively accessible. For example, suppose she has a friend who regularly makes disrespectful jokes about her. In the past, she laughed along because she did not want tension. Eventually, she says, "I do not find that funny anymore," and changes how much access that person has to her. The friend may complain that she has changed. That is true. But changing is not automatically becoming worse. Sometimes people describe your growth negatively because the new version of you no longer gives them the same benefits as the old version. This is one of the hardest lessons in her comeback. She has to accept that becoming healthier may disappoint people who are comfortable with her unhealthy patterns, and she cannot measure her progress by how comfortable everyone else feels around her. Real growth often makes certain relationships quieter. Some friendships become distant. Some conversations disappear. Some people stop calling because the old dynamic no longer works. That does not mean she should become cold or suspicious of everyone. It means she becomes capable of recognizing the difference between genuine connection and convenience. Her comeback is not about becoming difficult for everyone. It is about becoming impossible to keep in relationships that require her to betray herself. And if that makes her less impressive to certain people, she can live with that. Number 10. She becomes more dangerous to her old patterns than to her old enemies. What if the person standing between the Sigma female and her best life is not an enemy, but an old pattern she keeps repeating? This is where her comeback becomes much deeper than revenge. She eventually realizes that changing the people around her means very little if she keeps responding to life in the same way. Maybe she has always given too many chances. Maybe she becomes attached to someone's potential instead of paying attention to their actual behavior. Maybe she stays too long because she remembers the good moments. Maybe she feels responsible for fixing people who never asked to change. These patterns can quietly control a person's life. And the uncomfortable part is that they often feel familiar, which makes them difficult to recognize. Imagine she repeatedly ends up with people who are emotionally unavailable. Each time, the person is different, but the story somehow feels the same. At first, she blames bad luck. Eventually, she becomes curious. What am I repeatedly accepting? That question changes the direction of her life. She begins examining her own decisions instead of only analyzing other people's behavior. She notices the early warning signs she used to dismiss. She notices how quickly she becomes emotionally invested. She notices the excuses she makes when reality does not match what she hoped for. Then she starts interrupting the pattern. Someone new can come into her life with the same charm, the same excuses, and the same confusing behavior. But this time, the old emotional doorway is gone. She does not need to fight them. She does not need to expose them. She simply recognizes the pattern early enough to make a different decision. That is real growth. Her enemies may change. Her circumstances may change. Even her relationships may change. But if her internal patterns remain untouched, she can keep recreating the same story with different characters. The Sigma female's greatest comeback therefore happens when she becomes honest enough to examine herself without attacking herself. She learns from her past without becoming trapped inside it. She stops asking only, "Why did they treat me that way?" She also asks, "Why did I keep making room for it?" That question requires courage. But once she changes the pattern loses its power. The same kind of person can knock on the same door. She simply does not live there anymore. In final words, Sometimes the greatest comeback is not becoming who you were before. It is becoming someone your past could no longer control. The Sigma female's journey is not about creating a perfect life or making everyone who hurt her regret their decisions. It is about learning from what happened without allowing it to become the permanent definition of who she is. She has discovered that real change happens quietly. She becomes more careful with her choices, more precise with her standards, and more honest about the patterns she once repeated. She understands that not every apology deserves another opportunity. Not every connection deserves continued access, and not every misunderstanding deserves an explanation. That is part of what makes her Sigma nature different. She has an unusual willingness to examine herself, question familiar patterns, and walk away from situations that no longer make sense for the woman she is becoming. And if you are going through that process right now, do not underestimate what is happening simply because nobody else can see it yet. Growth can look ordinary while completely changing your future. Your comeback does not have to impress everyone. It only has to make sense for the life you are building. So keep learning. Keep becoming wiser. Keep choosing what is healthy over what is familiar. One day, people may be shocked by how much you have changed, but you will know the truth. You did not become someone else. You finally became more fully yourself. And God bless you.